So first up, we have Kate Modler. She's a project manager and energy professional at DeerStone Consulting, and she's based in Anchorage and has been working on REPOP, which stands for Renewable Energy Performance Optimization Program, alongside folks at the Northwest Arctic Borough. So I'm going to turn it over to Kate to kick us off.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Like Jenny said, I work with DeerStone Consulting. I'm just gonna get my screen share set up here. Um, let's see here. Oops. Can you guys see that?
Yes. Looks
Awesome.
good.
Yeah, so I want to echo everything that Nathan said. Thank you so much for the invite and for having me, Jenny. This sounds like a really awesome group, and I really look forward to getting to connect with everyone else that's here as well. I think one thing about this REPOP program, which I'll kind of go into more detail later, but it's really a group effort. I work really closely with the Northwest Arctic Borough, with Ingemar, Mathiasen, and also Shantae Schroyer, who is often on this. I think she's on the meeting today. Um, so yeah, I'll kind of dive in from there. So basically, the goal of this REPOP program is it's really complex, and so it's hard to get into in the time that we have in this meeting. But some of our main goals are to assist tribes with independent power producer financial management. So this renewable energy program focuses on tribes in the Northwest Arctic Borough that have renewable energy systems, and all of those systems are managed or owned by this independent power producer model. Um, Within that, we also monitor the performance of these renewable energy systems, which I'll get into the details of a little bit more later. And kind of one of the main things that I think about in my day to day is to support local operators in just, your daily operation and maintenance of renewable systems by creating this kind of like regional targeted approach so we can all learn from each other and have a bit of a network to kind of bounce ideas off and bounce problem solving methods off, stuff like that. And then, kind of one of the longer term goals of this program is to also provide ongoing training and investment in local operators. Um, yeah, so they can keep improving their skills. Um, so, one thing that I really like to root myself in when I'm working on this project specifically is to kind of think about this web. We call this the REPOP web. Um, and I think kind of the biggest takeaway in this sense is really that a program like this can't be successful just with one person or just with one entity. Um, it's not really something that you can just hire one person to do and then it works out. So I think this web kind of helps illustrate how we envision this program to function. So kind of at the center and at the focus of this is the local IPP operator, and in that also like the community as a whole. And then kind of working outwards from there, we have the next level of support for that IPP operator. So we have people like the REPOP coordinator, Shantae, who's on this meeting, the Northwest Arctic Borough Finance Department, tribal administrators and tribal professionals, and then like my role as a consultant to kind of help manage and bridge the gap between all of those webs. And then that outer layer is, the outside contractors, technical support, things like that that have helped either like build the system or help us with technical support for the system. So like I think a really good example of this is actually just over last weekend, we were having some trouble with heat in the battery building in Noatak. And so this was a great example of kind of how these systems weave together because I noticed that we had an alarm going off from our temperature sensors. So then I was able to get in contact with Shantae, the REPOP coordinator, and the local IPP operator. And then we kind of were troubleshooting that together. And then, if we continue to have problems, then we can go back out to an external contractor. So I think it's a lot of coordination and collaboration. But yeah, kind of the big takeaway from that is that it's not a one person job, and you need a lot of entities to be involved for this to be successful. Um, just a few examples of kind of what we have going on. I personally always love seeing the details about kind of how some of this stuff works. So this is some tracking that like the REPOP program provides. So Shantae and I work to keep very detailed, both financial and performance kind of tracking sheets, but this is a bit more of an overview of it. So you can see kind of year over year in Shungnak, the solar power generation, and in Noatak is a much newer system, so you can kind of see that. But yeah, it's cool to see those trends over time. And I will say one thing I think to point out with Noatak, I think this is a good area to highlight too, that these systems are really ever evolving and definitely not perfect. And so I think working with other regional cooperatives and like talking to Natalie and Nathan and any advice from other people is also really helpful. One thing that's happening in Noatak, you can see those numbers aren't as updated because the current location of the power plant in Noatak is actually being eroded by a river. And so one thing that happened is AVEC was able to tap into the transformers from the solar array for a temporary power plant. So while that system is not at its peak functionality right now, it continues to be a collaborative effort between us and AVEC. And, if we didn't have those solar transformers where they were, it'd be really difficult it would have had to have been a much different conversation for AVEC and to try to get that power plant to continue to run and for Noatak to continue to have power through the winter. So yeah, it's kind of one thing to note there, just like the complexities of the program in general. This is another aspect, kind of a more technical aspect of the program that we support. This is a little screenshot of the online dashboard that Shantae and I monitor pretty much daily. So this is kind of where we can see all the information about how the system's performing, current up-to-date load data. And so you can see the red here is the generator sets, the green represents solar PV production. And so this is kind of our, remote access. And part of the reason why the web works so well, I think, is because we're not relying on one person to keep track of all of this stuff. We have me, we have Shantae, we have local operators, we have other people that have access to this. So it doesn't fall on just one person to keep track of all this information. This is just one instance that I kind of wanted to point out where these renewable systems really performed in the exact way that we wanted them to. And it's really cool to have, a concrete kind of record and some data behind all of this. So this red line represents the gen sets and how they're performing. So you can see kind of before the red line is following the orange line, which represents the load, the community load. And the gensets fell off. So there would have been a power outage, except for this purple line represents the battery energy storage system that we have up in Noatak. And so you can see that as soon as the gensets came offline, the battery went online and started discharging, which kept this orange load line online the whole time. And then the operator got an alarm, or I got an alarm and talked to the operator about it. And then we were able to get the generators back online before the battery was all the way discharged. So the community didn't actually experience a power outage. So I just think it's kind of cool to highlight that these systems were kind of working exactly the way they were designed to. This obviously is not representative of every time. But it's just one example where there would have been a power outage and there wasn't, because these systems were in place. Um, yeah, kind of the last thing I want to discuss that I added this in because I thought that it could be potentially relevant, and interesting to some folks in this group. Kind of, we also keep track of both revenue and expenses over time. I think it's important to note that both of these systems in Shungnak and Noatak are have generated a significant amount of revenue, and the tribes are actually unsure, or not unsure, but they haven't decided what they're going to spend that revenue on yet. Shungnak was actually really invested in spending that money generated by the solar to install heat pumps in residential buildings. And then we were actually able to find some other grant funding for that. So that was kind of, we were um, lucky in that. And now we're having ongoing conversations about what we want to spend that money on. But just kind of a snapshot of the expenses. I think it's important to note. So these blue, I think it's interesting how similar they are. And the blue slices of the pie represent battery building station service. So that is the power that's actually going to the battery to like keep the lights on and keep our remote monitoring system, stuff like that. And in both cases, I also think it's important to note that maintenance is obviously taking a really big chunk of those expenses, and maintenance covers things like our outside contracts, with any sort of like the remote monitoring. If something goes wrong and we need to troubleshoot, we need to fly in any outside contractors, things like that. That would all fall in maintenance. So that kind of takes the brunt, yeah, of your long-term expenses. And I will say also the differences in insurance is primarily motivated by the scale and just the timing of some of our projects as well. So yeah, I want to leave lots of time for Natalie and Nathan, and I also think that the questions will be really valuable in this section. So I just wanted to keep it short, and hopefully that was informative. Yeah, and there's my contact information for anyone. Cool. I'll pass it off.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate. That was really, really interesting, especially those examples you shared of the data and how the renewables were not only, saving an outage, but also that they're helping with that temporary power plant. That's, yeah, a huge win, even if it's not necessarily showing in that generation data. Um, if you guys have any questions from Kate's presentation that you don't want to forget before our discussion, feel free to put them in the chat so that we can get back to them. And in the meantime, we'll move on to Natalie and Nathan. So, Natalie, Kiley-Bergen, and Nathan Hill both work with the Lake and Peninsula Borough. Natalie is based in Anchorage and is the borough's new utility collaborative manager. And Nathan is based in Kokkinok and is the borough manager, steeped in all things infrastructure, education, and economic development. They are going to be sharing about the formation and goals of their new utility collaborative, and maybe even getting some input from you all on some of their plans as they get underway. So I'll turn it over to Natalie.
Hey Natalie, I can go ahead and kick it off if you so desire and
Please.
introduce. I'm again Nathan Hill, Lake and Peninsula Borough. I'm out in Kokkinok, and I already have a question for Kate, but I'll save that. How do I get one of those from my village? But actually, we need to compare notes and keep in touch on all of this because it's important moving forward for us to find efficiencies, and I guess that's the point of us being here today. Um, I've got a background in village, everything village, and utilities is part of that background, uh, and recognized in the last decade and have been kicking a can down the road, singing a song about finding efficiencies for utilities, be it bookkeeping, lineman work, mechanical work, etc. Because we all have very much islands that we live on in rural Alaska, and we need to uh, continue to move forward where repair by replacement is no longer an option. The state's out of money, and we need to find ways to make the current technology that we have last as long as possible and share our resources. So I will say that this couldn't have been possible without the Denali Commission. This utility collaborative had a kickstart with 40101D money. We needed some match money along with that 40101D grid resilience money, and Denali Commission was kind enough to kick in some funding for the match on that. Bristol Bay Native Corporation has also been a huge partner, and we've also got some funding in from Alaska Venture Fund. So I'd like to give a shout out to the funders. Without them, this wouldn't be possible, and we've been kicking this idea around for the last, I would say, decade and a half, and it's really awesome that we can see it come to fruition. I don't want to burn a bunch of time, but I did want to give credit to folks out there. And again, the Lake and Penn Borough has been working closely with DeerStone, and I think we've got something really valuable in the form of a service that we can lend to our communities, and we're excited to get going on it. Again, I've been kicking the can down the road for 10 years, but Natalie is new. She has been hired by the borough to fill the program management side of this and make this happen. And I'd like to go ahead and introduce Natalie, and you can go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, that's a really excellent introduction. And similar to Kate, I think we could talk about this for quite a long time. So definitely follow up with us afterwards if you'd like to have the fully long version, but I'll try to keep it short because I think, yeah, I do think those questions and input from the group will be really helpful. So it's kind of just the teaser of the work that's been so long coming and taken a lot of legwork to just get to this stage. So yeah, I'm Natalie. I'm the Utility Collaborative Manager. I'm based in Anchorage, background in infrastructure, planning and permitting, and also some energy policy. So I see some very familiar names, but you might be seeing me in a new context. I started this position in mid-January, so I'm not quite 2 months into the role. So this is a good preliminary view of what we're working towards at this stage in the process. If I can get my slides to
I can
go.
help try to fill in the blanks if there's any other, if you want to kick anything over to me, Natalie, also. So stand by.
Excellent. Yes. Okay. Jump into as you see needed. So as Nathan mentioned, this has been 10 plus years in the making. And the goal of the Utility Collaborative, really big picture, is to provide centralized support, add administrative and project capacity, and achieve some economies of scale to make a difference in costs and quality for our, at this point, electric utilities is the current focus, but obviously all our utilities are really closely connected throughout our communities. We were accelerated by what I'm kind of calling compounding funding, which means a funding source that was able to grow by having more communities participate. If you're not familiar with the DOE grid resiliency funding, often called 40101D, there was grid resiliency funding allocated specifically for tribes and Alaska Native corporations that were able to be secured through consortium funding, consortium applications. So we had a large consortium come together in the borough and secure multiple millions of dollars for grid resiliency. This funding has a high cost match requirement, which is where really remarkable funder support has come in, and altogether has been the accelerant that created the opportunity to bring staff on to support the collaborative. While it's housed at the borough to provide that administrative and management and financial support, it's really led by communities, which is in step with how the borough itself operates. Just a little background on the Lake and Peninsula Borough. It stretches from Lake Clark through Lake Iliamna, communities on Bristol Bay, and the Bering Sea, out into communities on the Gulf and the Chigniks. So it's kind of where you are map-wise. I really don't have a map here for you. The borough is founded on education. It's a very bottom-up, community-led borough. Focuses these days include energy, education, fish, transportation, now supporting some housing work and overall project management. About 1,500 people in the borough through 16 communities and 13 utilities. there are 3 communities connected to the same utility and 2 communities without utilities. We've already touched on a lot of these key partners, but big thank you and appreciation for both the material support, but also the thought partnership and advocacy and greater partnership through the Denali Commission, Bristol Bay Native Corporation, Alaska Venture Fund, been a great partner with DeerStone supporting this collaborative. And the core of it are our borough communities and utilities who are the backbone of the system and the region. And a special thank you and appreciation to Igiugig Village Council, who's leading our large 401D consortium. The Bureau of Indian Affairs Tribal Energy Development Capacity Grant was also a Kickstarter, the borough secured a TEDC grant that was able to take a close look at 5 utilities and 5 power systems in the borough as kind of a first step towards a larger collaborative. The overall goals of the collaborative are to improve system reliability and through that lower operational and fuel costs, which lower the cost of living, improve quality of life together in the borough. That would also include minimizing emergency repairs, moving towards long-term planning and that system longevity, and also support and facilitate the integration of renewable energy across the borough. Our utilities are in really different stages between some have had renewable energy for a long time, some are in the process of developing it, and then other communities are pursuing projects. And so centralizing that technical support and contractor engagement and bringing that expertise into communities and fostering it where it is already in communities. More granularly in the medium term, our priorities include maximizing impact of development of projects through the 401D funding by having projects that include multiple communities. That cost-saving piece, we're starting to provide administrative support to PCE reporting to ensure that communities and utilities are getting the maximum benefit and effective rates for power are as low as possible. We're working towards establishing shared maintenance and service contracts so that when you have to bring technical outside contractors into the region, that they're able to support multiple communities in the same trip. And a lot of times if one community has a tank farm cleaning they're scheduling, other communities need that same service. And so centralizing that through shared contracting. And all of that relies on deeper relationships between utilities so that there's an understanding of what expertise and needs exist and how those can work together. And by putting support within the borough, then that kind of creates another piece to that triangle of communication and support. In that we're also supporting agency communication, coordination, grant reporting as well. And that's bringing a deeper technical understanding of each of our community's power systems. And we're working towards some of that reporting, seeing all that data you're able to see remotely, Kate, is really exciting. So being able to provide consistency in data management and institutional knowledge to support communities. And Nathan puts this really well, but being the person to call and just someone available to take a call when there's an issue and an opportunity, a question. And so creating that reliability and communication and availability. There we have challenges, as all initiatives do, are in these early staffed stages, still rounding out our project match, so some funding availability and limitations. We're asking for time and investment from folks, which creates a risk of a new initiative. So we're really building trust in that process. And folks in our communities have so many various demands on administrative capacity, as is true across Alaska. As I mentioned, the kind of impact of those emergency repairs and response, we're supporting some communities that may have a more urgent need, and that can take precedent over long-term planning. So we're working through that process, and communities across the borough are navigating fuel delivery obstacles. And as is life, many parallel priorities that require a lot of time and investment. And so we're bringing it all together through the collaborative. A quick snapshot of our utilities, their relative rates, fuel prices, and as I mentioned, about half our communities have renewables either in place or in development, with some have funding secured. So That's been really exciting. But we have communities that are approaching that $1 per kilowatt hour PCE limit or have exceeded it, and some particularly high fuel prices for some communities. I'll touch lightly on the 401D project, and if anyone on the call is working in that project and program space, would love to connect and share insights. Across the borough, $4 million has been allocated through the Grid Resiliency Program through 22 applicants. If you're not familiar with formula funding, at least this particular program, you apply and kind of get your allocation secured before you have to provide a specific project. So getting into our specific program, we have that money secured. It's been allocated through one large consortium, the Yagik Village Consortium, which had 14 communities, 18 applicants across that consortium. And then there are also two smaller consortiums in the borough and some individual applicants. And we're supporting all of those entities in pursuing projects through 401D. There's a high cost match, so nearly 15% or nearly 50% between a utility cost match requirement and an admin and technical assistance and kind of grant-wide match requirement. So we've been really successful and really grateful to be able to bring in a lot of support for that high cost match. And then we're maximizing that impact by looking at other non-federal match projects in place that are already ongoing in communities and what are the utility and grid needs for those projects and bringing those together. So as I was getting at, we're in the project development stage. So we have the money secured. We actually have through 2032 to develop and implement and spend the secured money. And there could be another allocation that comes out sometime this fiscal year. The DOE's been saying could come out for a long time. So we're ready if there are more funds available to be allocated. Some examples of eligible projects include battery storage specifically for microgrid integration, generator upgrades and maintenance, fire prevention and fuel management, which can include fuel storage upgrades, including monitoring and grid equipment and smart grid surveillance, and broader management and workforce training and maintenance opportunities. The bill language itself is vague, and it's really, there's an onus on the project applicants to make the pitch of why what they need helps grid resiliency. And so there's a piece of flexibility that is both an opportunity and requires some extra problem solving and prioritization, because there are so many ways that we can improve grid resiliency in our communities. And the just big picture of where we're at best practices wise, we're looking to learn best practices and emerging strategies, and happy to get this opportunity to share where we're at if there are any insights here. We're looking to learn from other regions that are doing that regional or sub-regional utility and operational support, including the REPOP program and other folks that I know are here on the call. Yeah, I'd love to pool expertise around how the 401D program is going for anyone that's working in that realm, and then looking to continue funding and match opportunities so that this collaborative persists beyond the 401D projects. I should have mentioned we're offering this support to our communities at no cost at this time. We're funded for a few years of my time and that greater support from contractors, but are looking to make this self-sustaining over time. And in that, shared contracting piece, would welcome insights and others' expertise on good contractors and where we can make really effective shared contracts for the region. And I'll kind of end with just the long-term success vision that we have. We want to make current funding last as long as possible, and that includes maximizing how other sources of eligible match, other funding, in-kind support can provide the most projects and the most impact across multiple communities. We want to give communities tangible cost reductions and savings through both economies of scale, but also PCE support, any grant support, and centralized contracting. And the long term is to become self-sustaining through earned value for utilities and communities that leads to their investment and participation, and complemented by funding opportunities. So leave it there. That's my contact if you'd like to get in touch. Nathan, any key points there? I know I feel like sprint with time, but got to most of what I had.
Yeah, Natalie, it's a whole bunch, and a lot to digest in the short time that we've got. And I would just echo the sentiment that if there are questions from folks on the screen here today, we're happy to collaborate with you on that, and also looking to learn from everyone in the room if you've got some nuggets for us uh, that you can offer to us. So again, thank you, Jenny, for the opportunity. And if there is time for questions, I guess I think that's what's next. But I'll hand the mic back to you, Jenny. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was really, really great information. Um, yeah, especially hearing about your focus on trying to do some like shared contracting and like some of those like, you know, nitty-gritty ideas for how to make this all play out are very exciting to me. So yeah, now we're gonna hit questions and discussion. We also have Shantae Schroyer, who is also going to join us for some of the discussions. Kate mentioned, works on the REPOP program. She's with the Northwest Arctic Borough and is based in Kotzebue, so has a lot of great experience that she can share as well in this discussion. There is one question in the chat from my colleague Jade, mostly directed at Kate, and I'm sorry if people can hear my dog barking, so I put on headphones. Um, but Jade asked, have any resources been developed to help guide other communities in setting up a similar web of support? Kind of referencing that, yeah, those like different webs that you showed.
Yeah, I think I can take a stab at it. I also, sorry, I'm just reading the question. I think one thing that I have been working on, like collaborating with DeerStone and the Northwest Arctic Borough, is kind of creating this like sort of IPP handbook. Uh, and primarily my role in that thus far has been, pretty centralized in the Northwest Arctic Borough. And I think that there's lessons to be learned from that are quite specific regionally. And in the grand scheme of things, I think that these lessons learned are really quite relevant to anywhere in the state. I also know I will like kind of point out I am like relatively new to the REPOP role, and I know that Brian Hirsch, who owns DeerStone Consulting, has been, kind of on this like IPP development uh, kind of path for a very, very long time. I'm sure Nathan can also speak to that, like as they've been on this path for a long time to create these kind of collaborative groups. So I think I don't that was like a little bit of a roundabout answer to your question, Jade, I think. And it's definitely on our minds. And we're working towards it kind of in baby steps at this point. But yeah, I think like the vision is definitely to use this knowledge throughout the region and throughout the state to kind of help support other communities as well.
Awesome. Thanks.
I can chime in a second if there isn't any questions
Yeah,
right now.
please.
I think our approach, we started talking about this over a decade ago, and we are looking for a way to kickstart it. And how we did kickstart it, Natalie had mentioned that there was some partnership and funding, and we were able to work. I think it was with BB&C, and it was Grace Diesel, DeerStone, and went and visited 5 of our communities and got granular information out of those communities. My thought on almost all of this is it's probably smart. It's probably smart to start small and prove prove a system before you try to take on too much. And so that's what we're hoping to do. We've got really granular information in 5 communities about their utilities and kilowatt hour production and what their needs are. And so maybe some of what those some of the low lying fruit in the solutions for those problems are. And I think the next thing on our agenda is to try to take on another 5 communities and get more granular data out of them, and have a staged approach, making sure you're not biting off too much, and then learning from that and applying it to everyone. I feel like this has got energy from Bristol Bay Native Corporation, because they're the Lake and Penn Borough is half of the half of the communities in the region. If we can build a system that works for our communities, we can spread it throughout the region. If our region can do it and grow it, then we can share it with everyone else, and you can do it too. This is it's not proprietary. It's challenges that the entire state of Alaska and rural communities is faced with, and we do need to find solutions if we're going to effectively have electricity in our communities. And so I think kind of going back to the original question is kind of how you're going to do it is I think our approach is start small, but recognize that this could be a solution for the entire state if we get it right.
Totally. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like there's always going to be those differences in your, support web, by region, by community, but like that identifying and connecting work that you are both trying to do, I think is a really key commonality and service. Steve, you have your hand up.
I do. Thanks.
Steve from REAP.
I had a question for Natalie and Nathan. If you all could expound more on where you're getting your match funding, and then how you see the program being self-sustaining after the 40101D funding runs out. Thanks very much.
Natalie, I'm going to punt to you on the first part of that, and I'll try to answer the second part of that on the
Yeah,
on the continued support. So
excellent. Yeah, so we have funding specifically from the Denali Commission, Alaska Venture Fund, and Bristol Bay Native Corporation that is for that match requirement in the 401D funding. And a portion of that can be technical assistance. And so all the work we're doing to figure out the highest priority needs in the borough, and then supporting the project development based on those needs and the contracts based on those needs fall into that space. And it's just a piece of all of the match needed. And so most of that the vast majority of that's going towards projects and what we're going to develop through 40101D. And then there are some energy and grid related projects happening throughout the borough that have state funding or other non-federal match funding, and communities will need that.
Got a little choppy there, Natalie. Do you mind restating that? It looks like you're back. Maybe you just restate that last sentence or so.
Yeah, I'm not sure I got cut off. Sorry about that. But any non-federal match funded energy projects happening in communities can be complemented with 40101D. So if there are power plant upgrades or distribution needs or fuel needs related to ongoing projects that are non-federal match, we can bring those together. So we're trying to round out the kind of other $500,000 $1 million we're working towards on non-federal match.
Oh, and on the second part of that, with the continued support, I think in the first few years here, since we are funded, we will be able to deliver these services free of charge to our communities, and that's who wouldn't want that. If there is 40101D money that's needed on a project, it's got match, and so if you need to replace a diesel engine, isn't it better to replace it for half the cost? So I think the answer though is really relationships and partnerships and building trust in those communities. And so one of the things we've got budgeted into some of this is travel to our communities. And I think through the course of the next couple of years, we will also track the benefits in kilowatt hours and in dollars to our communities. And when a few years goes by and someone gets reliant and used to calling a phone number when they need support for their utility, it's understanding that a lot of communities, when you replace a utility manager, they don't know who to call. And so they've got to figure all of that stuff from the ground up. And I've seen this in several communities. So I guess the short answer is we will develop relationships and continue working with our communities, but we can effectively, at the end of a couple of years, show a dollar value and the benefit that this has brought to the communities. And if folks would want to pay a membership or continue with a partnership, I think there's opportunities down the road we don't know about. But I do imagine there will be some kind of a membership fee included, depending on what those resources look like.
Great, thanks. I'm curious, this was kind of one of our discussion topics or touches a little bit on it about like, how are you planning for long-term success and thinking about like establishing something that lasts? And I think that was a great sort of perspective on how you guys are thinking about that in Lake and Peninsula Borough. And I'm also curious to kind of direct a similar question to Kate. You guys are set up around mostly like having independent power producers creating revenue, which can also be sustaining. But I'm just curious to get your take on how, and Shantae too, on how you see this model being supported in the future.
Yeah, I would love to jump in and kind of talk about that. I didn't really delve into it as much in my presentation, but I think one thing that's notable, the REPOP program, like up to this point, has been fully grant funded with some match. But yeah, I think it's kind of similar to what you guys are doing as an approach right now, like using our grant funding right now to support the development of these IPPs and support trust building and relationship building. Kind of trying to create some of those systems at the outset that will hopefully like run, the farther and farther down the road we get, they'll become smoother and more effective. But I think that, that is kind of the vision, is like the IPP ultimately is money for the community to choose how to spend. And so part of what we're doing is we're looking into, like you mentioned, Nathan, tracking exactly kind of the benefits of all of these in kilowatt hours and dollars in these renewable systems, but then ultimately being able to say this is a good place to invest your money, or if your community decides that it's not, then it's not. So I think that's, we're grant funded right now, but the vision like long term is that this is a self-sustaining program and it provides enough benefit to communities that they're willing to invest in it. And I would say, I guess my perception of it up to this point is that it definitely is something valuable. It's like having, like you mentioned, someone that they're able to call when they're just not quite sure who else to call. And I feel like that's a good chunk of my job is actually like I'm not an expert in a lot of these things, but it's just someone to call to be like, hey, I need help with this. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to go consult an expert and kind of let you know the next steps. And I think there's like some real value in that. So yeah, I don't know if that fully answered your question, Jenny, but.
Hey, Jenny, I can ramble about something else a little bit if I have a minute.
Sure, please.
I think part of the model that we need to understand with rural Alaska is that there's heavy out migration and something called a brain drain. And if we pull some of these services back into our communities, if there's a lineman job, if there's a bookkeeping type job to help track PCE, if there's a diesel mechanic job, and you provide economies of scale for 5 communities, well, maybe then a diesel mechanic can live in one of those communities and and have a solid job, basically. And so one of the things that we recognize going into this is that since everyone's operating like a satellite or an island, is that we call mechanics and they come in from Anchorage or the Valley and they walk away with a paycheck, and that's not sustainable. If you're constantly sending money out, how are you supporting your community? And so I think kind of the bigger crystal ball and the hope is that if we build this internally within the region, that we'll be able to supply those positions from the region and hopefully make it healthier economically as well. And so that's might sound pie in the sky, but I feel like that could be part of the crystal ball view of how, where this goes if we can develop systems like this and multiply them throughout the region and then throughout Alaska. Maybe this is one thing out of 10 that helps keep the villages that we live in healthy.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really powerful perspective, and I think kind of underscores the real value in like a borough leading some of these efforts with your like expansive focus on, the whole economic development of the region and
Yeah.
how, yeah.
I mean, we've got a career and technical education piece to our school district that is shared with Southwest School District, with Dillingham, with Bristol Bay Borough, and this. It's very easy to imagine this being a piece of that career and technical education with the schools that are in place and developing skills that keep people local and keep our villages and communities viable. So I don't feel like it's a really it's a must. We need to work on this and we need to figure out solutions. Alaska in general is shrinking in population, and the villages are it's magnified in a lot of our villages, that issue. And so I feel like this isn't an option to figure these things out. It's a necessity.
Mhm. Yes. Um, I want to make sure we have time for updates, but I also want to kind of uplift one of Natalie's call outs at the end of her presentation. Maybe if there's anybody who's still on the call who has worked on or is working on grid resilience, that 40101D, if you maybe want to like raise your hand or put it in the chat so that maybe Natalie knows who to connect with after. Um, to kind of yeah, work together on some of the program opportunities and constraints. And with that, I think I will open us up for around the room updates from anyone who wants to share from your program or projects. And I'll maybe start it by saying that our next meeting is going to be on Wednesday, May 6th. And it'll actually be a little different. It'll be a part of REAP's Spring Speaker Series. It'll be like the culminating event in our speaker series. So we might have some new faces joining us for that call, and we'd love to see you all there. It's going to be focused on sharing findings from REAP's updated clean energy workforce opportunity analysis, which I've been working on for the past year or so, and actually incorporate some lessons and programs from these meetings. So I think it'll be a good session, and we'll send out the invite in a couple weeks. But yeah, please feel free to share any other updates.
Maybe I'll kick off. Thanks, Jenny and everybody. Kate, it was good to hear what you guys are up to. I'm Annalise Klein-Gerlach. For those who don't know, I'm over at ASAP, the Alaska Center for Energy and Power, leading our education and workforce development program. 3 quick program updates that Jenny, I'll just send you a link to afterwards to include. But number 1, our internship program, which Kate, we got several years ago, coming up to Alaska. So our undergraduate program, we are sending out our offers this week, but we had over 150 applicants for like 15 spots. So we have just some phenomenal students who applied and want to work on energy in Alaska. I don't have funding for them, but if you do, and if you're interested in partnering with a student, I do have a lot of them. Anyone who said, please share my application information with other potential opportunities. We've got students from Alaska who go to school in the lower 48 and want to come home and be able to find interesting work here in the state. We have people who are from the lower 48 who want to come up here and, you know, potentially move up here long term. So I'll put my email in the chat. Please reach out if you'd be interested in seeing some of those students. There's some great folks. Second, we were recently awarded the Murdoch Partners in Science program. And so that is for teachers, high school and middle school science teachers in the state to come and do energy research with some professors at UAA and UAF over the summers. We're specifically looking for some teachers in Anchorage for this summer for our first cohort. And so if you know science teachers, whether it's, you know, your kids or people that you know, if you know some science teachers who might be interested in thinking about that opportunity, it's a paid stipend. It's pretty cool, but it is a fast turnaround to build this first cohort. So again, would love to connect with anyone. And then finally, we have our Energy Leadership Accelerator, which is a cohort of energy professionals, and we bring them together for online virtual learning and then on-site in Alaskan communities. So we're looking to build a cohort for Alaska participants and participants from Guam, bringing them together, thinking about remote islanded communities, and we'll be visiting Galena and Fairbanks in August. So applications will open for that soon. And I would, love to have folks who want to connect and build their network of remote energy leaders a part of that. So a lot of words. Jenny, I'll send you some stuff later.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll definitely share it out with the group, and I'll follow up with you about 2 of those things.
Hi, everyone. I have an update. My name is Taylor Asher. I recently started at the Alaska Municipal League. I wanted to mention a heat pump installation training that's going to be happening in Juneau, coming up in just a couple of weeks on March 17th and 18th. I will drop the flyer into the chat. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm also going to kind of announce a training that we are going to be doing for DCRA. We are going to be holding our second bulk fuel administrative capacity course. It's going to be in Nome in partnership with Coeric. It's going to be the week of March 31st. I'm also going to drop a flyer into the chat.
That's super exciting. Thanks for sharing that, Trisha. I know we had Lynn on to share about that program when it was getting started. So that's great to hear you doing your second.
It's just not feeling that dang cold.
Yeah, I feel you.
Trisha, I sent that flyer and training out to all the utility folks in the borough just this morning.
And Trisha, there's a question. Sorry, there's a question for you in the chat too, if you see that one.
Bertha, is open to the state or Coeric region? Yes, it's in partnership with Coeric. So please attend. Let me do that. And also, Natalie, thank you. I don't think it'll let me drop it into the chat. I will drop the link into the chat. Thank you, Natalie, for doing that. I got to meet Natalie last week at our financial management training, so it was awesome. When I saw her on, I'm like, that's Natalie. I know her.
Love those connections.
Which
and just to clarify,
go ahead.
I was just going to clarify that folks from outside the Coeric region can attend if they have,
right now,
if you have space or what?
It's in the Coeric region, since it is Coeric who is putting it on. But I also know that we are accepting Kotzebue as well, just because the travel grant, it is a little bit limited. It is only up to 1,500, and if you're trying to come from the Aleutians up to Nome, that's going to be very pricey. So we are going to be holding this 2 to 4 times a year. We're just kickstarting this year off chilling in Nome.
Okay. And so if folks are interested in getting in touch about a different region, so that should they talk to you and Lynn?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they can reach out to me. They can reach out to Lynn. If they are a bulk fuel community, they can also email the bulk fuel email address, and that'll get to me. But any way of touching base with DCRA, you can get a hold of us.
Perfect. Last call. We're at time. Okay, thank you all for joining today. I'll be sure to send out notes and a recording in the next week or so. and contact information for our awesome presenters. Thank you, Kate, Nathan, Natalie, Shantae for being here, even though I know you didn't get a chance to speak. But we really appreciate you being a part of the group. Take care.
Thanks for having me.